together again, and so we left off when last time we got together. We were talking about this whole thing around expectations, expectancy, and when I sat in this place of pondering about Mary and the point where it came the point in Jesus's life where here's this promise that she'd been given, that she carried and given birth to, and then nurtured to make sure that it was able to be developed in the right way. And it's time to release this out to the world. It's time for the promise to step out and take on the life that it's supposed to take. And you kind of sense when you read the Gospels, you sense that this, or at least I felt that there was probably this struggle within Mary. I know I've sensed it as a mom, and I shared a little bit of that last time. But you see her again she and her other sons coming to collect Jesus, kind of like, this is getting out of hand, because this is not what she thought it was going to look like. And really, if you think about then, from that point when Jesus' ministry really moved into the totality of his ministry, those 3 years, I guarantee you it didn't look anything like what she expected. Can you imagine the emotions to watch this promise that you've nurtured to be released, and everything that came forth and hurled at her promise, at her son? So, I think about this, when you think about Mary, when the angel comes to her, you are blessed and highly favored of the Lord. Well, what did that come with? For her, the promise that, she's blessed and highly favored, so the Lord is giving her a promise. There was so much shame attached to that promise. Again, ability to stand in the midst of what the world would try to put shame onto that promise. Here she's an unwed teen, pregnant in those days, so there is shame. And then also with that, the promise itself, Jesus himself took on shame. So he actually took on her shame at the cross, which is amazing. And she is blessed and highly favored. Now, on the earth, in the midst of all of that, that was unseen. So it was spoken to her that she was blessed and highly favored, and the result of the promise was spoken to her. But on this journey, it did not look anything like blessed and highly favored, what we would consider in the natural. So all those things went unseen, but she had to stand on those, knowing that that's what the Lord had said. So a lot of times, this whole thing about observing, we have expectations, and so with our natural perceptions and our natural eyes, we look for things to look a certain way. We have this expectation of how it's going to unfold, and even emotionally, what it's going to feel like. Really, our emotions tend to ride that current based on how things look, in proportion to our expectations. When they meet our expectations, we can be feeling really good, and when they don't, we can be confused and angry and hurt and not, just really not understanding what's going on. So when we think about our emotions, usually it's tied to the comparison of how things appear and what we expected them to appear to be. And most of the time, they don't look the same. So this whole thing of observing is learning to observe with a different perspective outside of emotions, a non-emotional perspective. And I know I've talked before about, this whole thing about curiosity, and that's what observing is about. It's about being curious about what's going on around you. And for me, I started, especially after this whole thing about this vision about expectations, I started to be really curious about the emotions that were going on in me. Like, why am I feeling that? Why is that making me feel this way? Why am I disappointed? So I really started to gauge what was going on in me, and I became really aware of a couple of things. One is I knew my heart's intention in what I was trying to do when I behaved a certain way, but I also observed that sometimes how my behavior was received by someone else wasn't what I intended. So what they received or the impact it had on them didn't align with what my heart was trying to. So I felt misunderstood a lot of the time, and that the perceptions of me were wrong often. Like people would judge me or perceive me based on the impact I had on them, as opposed to what my intention was or what my heart was, and vice versa. I would find myself being if I was hurt, I would take that to the Lord. And remember, I've said before that the Lord takes us at our heart. And one day, about a year or so ago, time, it's a blur, but he reminded me, Trisha, I take you at your heart. And then he asked me a question: can you take others at their heart? See, I want to be taken at my heart. So the Lord sees the intentions of my heart when they're pure, when they're out of love. So can I believe good intentions about someone else's behavior, that they're coming from a heart of good intentions? And especially in this one relationship where there was a huge struggle and it got very, very difficult, I knew that person's heart, and yet what was coming at me didn't align in any way with what I knew about that person's heart. So being able to take them at their heart and letting those other things go, I became an observer of their behavior and started to be really curious about what is that about? What is going on? What's the struggle in that person that is making their behaviors not align with what I know about their heart? So when you start to move into this place of observing yourself, being curious and observing yourself, then you start to have this awareness that sometimes things don't line up, and you begin to have that curiosity about other people. And then I found myself having that curiosity about God and about the promise. Like if things didn't look like what I thought they were supposed to look like, I would become curious about that. Why? I know God's heart. I know that his heart towards me is good, and I trust that. So why don't things look the way I think they should look? And so I would take those perceptions to the Lord. This doesn't look like what I thought it was going to look like. Why am I experiencing emotion and pain around this? And a lot of times it's because I had expectations of what it would look like. So I've gotten to a point, and you'll get to a point where you begin to just observe God's hand at work in the promise he gave you, and you're able to let go of and release what you thought it was going to look like, and what you expected to see with your natural eyes. And you start to really see things unfold, and the mystery around how he's doing things, which is so much, it's always bigger, it's always better, it's always surprising, it's more fun, it's more creative, it's more genius. One of the things I will share with you, and this was really profound, and this was several years back. I was in a place, I wasn't very far in my journey with walking with the Lord, and I had, for the first time in my life, really begun to kind of dream. I hadn't really dreamed about my life, and I started to have dreams, and those dreams, a lot of those dreams were based on promises I felt that I'd been given, but I started to dream and imagine. And I was working with a lady who was kind of a spiritual counselor, spiritual mentor, and we were praying one day, and I'd just been really heavy and had some fear, but I really didn't understand what it was about. And so we prayed, and as we prayed, I had this vision, this image in my mind of I was holding like this 8.5 by 11, just a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that had my dream on it. and so she was talking about how a lot of times we put our dreams in a frame, like we put a framework around our dreams, and that becomes our box for our dreams. That's our expectation of what our dream is going to look like. So as we were praying, what I saw myself put this piece of paper in a frame, and I hung it on a wall, and it was this huge wall, and all that was hanging on it was this little bitty 8.5 by 11 framed picture. And what I saw was the Lord come and take that picture down, and he handed me a wallet-size photo. And so what I realized, a fear that I was wrestling with, because they weren't appearing the way I thought, what I was wrestling with was, oh, my dream is too big. I shouldn't be dreaming that big. God doesn't have that big of a plan for me. My dreams for my life are bigger than God's dreams for my life. I mean, all those things. That was the fear that was in there was, here I've got this nice, big, pretty framed dream, and you know what? All he has for me is a wallet-sized photo. And so we had to take that before the Lord, because that's not truth. So his truth tells us that it's more than we could ever hope, dream, or imagine. And so, I just started dreaming, and I thought my dream was huge. And so we went before the Lord again, and we prayed. And I saw the same image. I'm taking my picture, I'm putting it in a frame, and I'm hanging it on a wall, and I see his hand come and take it down. But the next thing that happened is he picked up this painter's palette, and he took his brush, and he painted that whole wall to wall, floor to ceiling, in a huge mural. And see, that's the truth. When our dream, and this is the thing that he's revealed to me about that vision since, he didn't take my dream and add to it. He took it down. My dream had nothing to do with his dream of the promise he'd given me. So when things didn't start to look like what I thought they were going to look like in my box, all these things came in about, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, God doesn't have big plans for me, whatever that is. And because for a while, that picture just stayed off the wall, and the wall was blank. In my life, I went through a season where I experienced staring at a blank wall. My dreams were dead. As far as I was concerned, my dreams were dead. They felt like they were dead. They were gone. And I sat there and I stared at a blank wall. And so getting to that point where we release our expectation of what the promise is going to look like to the Lord, and let him do with it what he's going to do with it. And I saw that happening in Mary's life. She and her other sons came to collect Jesus, and then she just had to, Jesus was going to go take on a life of his own, and his ministry was going to take on a life of its own, and God was going to accomplish the fulfillment of the promise he gave to Mary in the way God was going to accomplish it. And I'm sure many times it didn't meet her hopes or dreams for what it would look like, but it was so much, as we know today, so much bigger than she could have ever hoped, dreamed, or imagined. Does that mean that there weren't emotions connected with the death of her dream for the promise, of her expectations for the promise? Yeah, it can feel like death. So I just wanted to share that with you, because that was a really powerful experience for me. Especially, it had helped me a lot when I sat in that place in my life, that season of my life when I sat staring at the blank wall. I knew what was going on. I knew that he had taken my dream down because he's got something bigger and better to paint. He hadn't started yet, or I couldn't see it yet. There's more to that too. There's more revelation behind that too, which I don't think that's for me to share right now. Hopefully he'll bring that back to mind at the appropriate time. But so I sat in this season staring at a big blank wall, and it felt like it was all gone, and it was all dead, and it was nothing. It felt like nothing. But knowing where I was in the process of that was encouraging. So I could sit in that place. I could sit with patience, and I could wait upon the Lord. I could wait on him for him to unfold it the way He planned to unfold it. Okay, so yeah, so natural eyes, we can't see with our natural eyes what God has in store, and there's purpose in that. Well, first of all, it wouldn't require faith, but sometimes I think, quite honestly, if I knew then what He was going to be doing, I might have run away. I mean, I may have just run and hid under a rock. So, but He brings you to the point. He brings you to the point and prepares you. He prepares you for the promise He's prepared for you. It's just a beautiful thing how that works. All along the way, He gives you a promise, and as He's preparing the promise, He's preparing you, and then it comes together. Okay, so our next session, our next time together, we're going to talk about kind of about inheritance. We touched on this like early about when we talked about blessing and curses. We talked a little bit about inheritance, but we really want to look about inheritance, legacy, and what it means to be an heir. So if you want to go study those things, and I look forward to our next time together. I hope again that there were some nuggets in this. I know my real hope is, number one, that it encourages you. Number two, I'm really trusting the Lord that what I'm sharing is in some way confirming things that He's already showing you. I mean, I'm not hoping you're learning anything new from me. He's a far better teacher than I am. I mean, the word is really clear. The day will come when no man will need to teach you. His Spirit has been poured out, and He desires to teach us. So He is a much better teacher than I would ever be. So I hope that the things you're hearing from me is just confirmation, encouragement, maybe challenging a little bit to become more curious, more hungry, more thirsty, to dig in a little bit deeper. But I just, again, thank you for the privilege and honor of getting to share with you and be on this journey with you. And I will see you next time.